brand new video for you. And this video is a long time coming. I'm going to explain to you why a calorie is not just a calorie. Now, of all the nutritional myths that are out there today, the calorie myth is one of the most pervasive and the most damaging out there today. All right, it's the idea that calories are the most important part of your diet and that the source of these calories makes no difference whatsoever. Zero, none. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie is what they say. That it doesn't matter whether you eat 100 calories of candy or 100 calories of broccoli and that they're going to have the same effect on your weight. All right, it's true in this regard that all calories have the same amount of energy. One dietary calorie contains 4,184 joules of energy. So in that respect, a calorie is a calorie. That regard is correct. But when it comes to your body, things aren't that simple. Come on. The human body is a really highly complex biochemical system with a lot of elaborate processes that regulate energy balance. So different foods go through different biochemical pathways, some of which are, inefficient and cause energy to be lost as heat. Now, even more important is the fact that there are different foods and micronutrients, and they have a major effect on the hormones and brain centers that control hunger and eating behavior. So let's start off at the top. Fructose versus glucose, number one. Now, the two main simple sugars in your diet are glucose and fructose. Okay, gram for gram, the two provide the same number of calories. But the way that they are metabolized in the body is completely and utterly different. Glucose can be metabolized by all of your body's tissues, but fructose can only be metabolized by the liver in any significant amount whatsoever. Now, here's a few examples of why glucose calories are not the same as fructose calories. Number one is ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. It goes up when you're hungry and down when you've eaten. One study showed that fructose leads to higher ghrelin levels, and that is more hunger than glucose. Number two, fructose does not stimulate the satiety centers in your brain in the same way as glucose does, leading to a reduced feeling of fullness. And number three, consuming a lot of fructose can cause insulin resistance, abdominal fat gain, increased triglycerides, blood sugar, and small, dense LDL compared to the exact same number of calories from glucose. So as you can see, the same number of calories vastly have different effects on your hunger, your hormones, and metabolic health. Okay. Number two, the thermic effect of food. Now, different foods go through different metabolic pathways, all right? Some of these pathways are far more efficient than other pathways are. The more efficient a metabolic pathway is, the more of the food's energy is used for work and less is dissipated as heat. So the metabolic pathways for protein are less efficient than the metabolic pathways for carbs and fats. Protein contains 4 calories per gram, but a large part of these protein calories is lost as heat when it's metabolized by the body. So, the thermic effect of food is actually a measure of how much different foods increase energy expenditure due to the energy required to digest, absorb, and metabolize the nutrients. So here's the thermic effect of the different macronutrients that we're looking at. Fat is 2 to 3%, carbs is 6 to 8%, protein 25 to 30%. Sources vary on the exact number, but it's clear that protein requires much more energy to metabolize than fat and carbs do. So if you go with the thermic effect of 25% for protein and 2% for fat, this would mean that 100 calories of protein would end up as 75 calories, while 100 calories of fat would end up as 98 calories. So there you go with that one. Number three, protein kills appetite and it makes you eat fewer calories. So, the protein story doesn't just end with increased metabolism. All right, it also leads to significantly reduced appetite, making you eat fewer calories automatically. Now, studies show that proteins are by far the most filling macronutrient out there. If you increase your protein intake, you start losing weight without counting calories or controlling portions. Protein puts fat loss on autopilot. Right, in one study, people who increased their protein intake to about 30% of their calories automatically started eating 441 fewer calories per day and lost 11 pounds in 12 weeks. All right? If you don't want to go on a diet but simply tip the metabolic scales in your favor, adding more protein to your diet may be the simple and most delicious way to cause automatic weight loss. Number four, the satiety index. Now, different foods have different effects on satiety. This means some foods will give you a greater feeling of fullness. All right? It will also, it's also much easier to overeat on some foods than it is with others. We know that. So for example, it might be really easy to eat 500 calories of ice cream, while you'd have to force feed yourself to eat 500 calories of eggs or broccoli, right? This is a key example of how the food choices you make can have a huge impact on the total calories that you do end up consuming. So, there are many factors that determine the satiety value of different foods, which is measured on a scale called the satiety index. The satiety index is a measure of the ability of foods to reduce hunger, increase feelings or fullness, and reduce calorie intake for the next few hours. So if you eat foods that are low on this index, then you're going to be hungrier and you're going to end up eating more. And if you choose foods that are high on the satiety index, you're going to end up eating less and losing weight. Okay? Foods that are high on the satiety index are boiled potatoes, beef, eggs, beans, fruits. Foods that are low are going to be like donuts and cakes. Number 5, low-carb diets lead to automatic calorie restriction. All right? Since the year 2002, there's been over 20 randomized controlled trials that have compared low-carb and low-fat diets to each other. The results consistently showed that low-carb diets lead to more weight loss than low-fat diets, often 2 to 3 times as much. So, one of the main reasons for this is because low-carb diets lead to drastically reduced appetites. People start eating fewer calories without even trying. But even when calories are matched between groups, the low-carb groups are going to usually lose more weight, but it doesn't always reach like statistical significance in that regard. The biggest reason for this is probably that low-carb diets also cause significant water loss. Excess bloat tends to go away within the first week or two. Lastly, the glycemic index. Now, there are many controversies in the field of nutrition, and the experts don't agree on many things, but one of the few things that almost everyone agrees on is that refined carbohydrates are bad. That's going to be your sugars like sucrose and high fructose corn syrup, as well as refined grain products like white bread. So, refined carbs tend to be low in fiber and are digested and absorbed really quickly, and that leads to rapid spikes in blood sugar. They have a really high GI, glycemic index, which is a measure of how quickly foods raise blood sugar. Now, when you eat a food that spikes blood sugar fast, it tends to lead a crash in blood sugar a few hours later. When this happens, you get cravings for another carb, like high carb snack. So, this is also known as the blood sugar roller coaster. Now, one study actually took and served people milkshakes identical in every aspect except that one had high GI and the other had low GI carbs. The high GI milkshake caused increased hunger and cravings compared to the low GI shake. Now, another study found that teenage boys ate 81% more calories during a high GI meal compared to a low. So, the speed at which carbs, carb calories actually hit your system can have a dramatic effect on their potential to cause overeating and weight gain. Now, if you're on a high carb diet, it's really crucial to choose whole, unprocessed carb sources that contain fiber. The fiber can actually reduce the rate at which glucose enters your system. So, different calorie sources can have vastly different effects on hunger, hormones, energy, expenditure, and the brain regions that control food intake. So, even though calories are important, counting them or even being consciously aware of them is not at all necessary to lose weight at all times. In many cases, simple changes in food selection can lead to the same or better results than restricting your calorie intake. So, that is the video on a calorie is not a calorie, is not a calorie, is not a calorie.